This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. Ritual season has begun, and anytime stories like this come out, I feel the need to cover it because so many Christians, so many people out there have been duped into believing that witches and witchcraft is not real. They have this illusion that anybody who does identify as a witch is just somebody who has some crystals in their home, who loves nature. These are all things that they've done deliberately, of course, but if you actually understand Satanism and the core of what Satanists and witches do, then these stories start to make very clear sense to you because you understand how important that red liquid is in these rituals that occur and that spell casting is actually real. Now, I always say this when I cover stuff with spell casting. It's amazing to me how many people out there think that it's fake, that they hear spell casting, things like, oh, abracadabra, right? Oh, none of this stuff is real. Yet it's so ingrained in them, they don't even realize it, right? They've seen all these movies that are about spellcasting from Harry Potter. They get indoctrinated with witchcraft at a young age. Almost every single movie that Disney's ever produced has a tie-in to magic, not to mention the Magic Kingdom. All the themes in the movies have to do with magic. The glass slipper from the Rose and Beauty and the Beast, right? The apple, magic mirror. We can go on and on and on. Everybody should know this. So there's always been a mass indoctrination, even going back to stories like Hansel and Gretel, right? When you actually start using your brain and thinking about stuff, you'd say, why in the world were kids getting read a book about Hansel and Gretel who got lost in the woods, who stumbled upon a witch, who then fattened up the children before eating the children? But this is the stuff that they read to you at a young age to tell you that it's a fable. Most of those stories, of course, those old school, Little Red Riding Hood, they all have pretty human ritualistic sacrifice themes to them. So it shouldn't surprise anybody when a story like this happens. A woman was accused of cooking her mother's corpse, casting spells. Now, a lot of people out there who have heard this story, it's making their heads explode because they can't believe that things like this occur. But doing a little digging on the woman who supposedly did this to her mother, I'll show you how the signs are there where you could see that these people are actually witches. So the story goes that the woman was spell casting. People showed up at her property. She was casting spells on them. And of course, then she decided after killing her mother to cook her mother for a nice meal, right? So people out there naturally will just think that this is some lunatic type story. But if they actually understand how the occult operates, the people who do these things all the time are always protected because the people who do it all the time are pretty much your celebrities and your famous politicians and all these people in Hollywood and the music industry. But here's a clip of the story first so you can have an understanding of what it's all about.
A woman is now charged in the horrific murder and dismemberment of her mother after a man said she was casting spells on him hours earlier. I have the disturbing updates about Toralina Fields and what she's also accused of doing to a dog. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. The case of Trudy Fields, a mother from Kentucky who was murdered and dismembered, is so incredibly sad. And the more we find out, the worse it gets. Fields' daughter, Toralina Fields, is now charged with murdering her, dismembering her, and cooking some of her remains on a stove at the home that they shared in Mount Olivet, Kentucky. That's between Cincinnati, Ohio, and Lexington, Kentucky. When I first told you about this, the autopsy was underway on what was believed to be Trudy Fields' remains. That autopsy is now complete, and that led to Toralina being charged with the murder of her mother. And now we're also learning from the grand jury indictment that prosecutors believe that Toralina Fields also tortured and killed a dog. The grand jury in Robertson County, Kentucky, indicted Toralina on a number of charges, including murder, abuse of a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, torturing of a dog with serious physical injury or death, and obstructing governmental operations.
Even though she has been indicted this morning, she's not been served.
So Toralina Fields was supposed to appear on video arraignment, but the murder indictment had just come down. Prosecutors didn't want to arraign her until she had seen the indictment, so that was postponed. Her mugshot is the only picture of her since the arrest. The victim is her mother, Trudy Fields. Investigators say she was shot in the head, stabbed multiple times, and Her body was dismembered. They also found body parts in a pot inside the oven. Tornolina was covered in blood. Officers say they had to use tear gas on her as she tried to cast spells on them.
You see, obviously, everybody's angry and confused and stuff at why, but how do you say, I'm so sad and I want justice for my family member, but I'm so sad because is my other family member not okay? Where do we go? We are way in a gray area there.
Yeah, now the family says Tortolina went to California a few years ago. They say she was a talented singer, a dancer, an actress. They say she was even in a few low-budget films while she was out there. But they say she had a motorcycle accident and she sustained a severe brain injury. And they're wondering if that may be at the root of all this. Reporting live, Brian Hemrick, WLWT News 5.
Brian, do we know if she was into witchcraft before all of this?
Yeah, we talked to the family about that. They say they were aware she was into witchcraft even before the motorcycle accident, but they say they didn't realize she had come back from California until all of this happened. Ashley?
So that's the story about this woman who's accused of cooking her mother's corpse. Now, if you actually go to this woman's Instagram page, you'll actually see some of the stuff that I expose on this channel all the time. And you'll see that she is actually a witch because they reveal themselves through signs and symbols. Now, is it a coincidence that this witch was trying to become famous in Hollywood, then returned home to Kentucky after failing to become famous, and then decided to commit a ritual sacrifice, maybe with plans to go back to Hollywood afterwards? Is it a surprise to anybody? Because there always seems to be some tie-in with aspiring actors, aspiring models, right? So if you go over to her Instagram page, here's one of the first things you'll see. You scroll through, and this is her, even though it doesn't look like the mugshot, not that it looks much better, but this is the same exact person. This has been verified that this is the same person. Obviously, makeup makes a big difference, and I guess a wig or two make a big difference because she doesn't have her, here she has her clown paint on, and her mugshot, she doesn't. So is this a coincidence? Because this is obviously a very staged photo, and you look at the back of her shirt, she's got that pyramid on the back of her shirt. Is that a coincidence? That pyramid with that eyeball on it? Isn't it just kind of weird? What is she, like the dollar bill? Is she a fan of all of these other celebrities who love to hold their hand up over their eye? Or is there a direct tie-in with the Eye of Providence and being a witch or a Satanist and practicing human sacrifice? Well, of course, there is a tie-in to that because people don't coincidentally just wear pyramids with eyeballs on their clothing, okay? Witches and Satanists do, and they get away with it. And it's not just coincidentally on your dollar bill. Somebody didn't just come up with the idea for the design of the dollar bill, and everybody just goes, that's really neat and cool, an eye in a pyramid. Could you explain it to us? And then they said, well, I was just fooling around, and I just, like pyramids. I thought it was a cool shape, and I was just looking in the mirror, and I said, I have a pretty eye, so I drew it that way, right? Does anybody ever think as to why these signs and symbols are around us constantly and there's repetition? No, they don't, because they've been trained not to look at signs and symbols. But signs and symbols reveal who these people actually are. So, coincidentally, of course, this person has the all-seeing eye and the pyramid on a coat, but I'm sure somebody out there will defend her, just like I'm sure somebody out there will defend her. Here she is on a black and white Masonic checkerboard floor doing some type of a photo shoot here, right? Now, just because this isn't a famous person that nobody really knows about doesn't mean that they're not involved in the occult, because there's lots of people who go out to Hollywood, who learn what it's really about, and they have no problem attempting some of these rituals or joining Eastern Star or joining Freemasonry if they're not already in. Because a lot of them go out there and they think this whole narrative that the government is built, and I say the government because that's who's really built this into people's minds about the American dream, this psyop, right? Oh, you can go out to Hollywood. If you're really pretty, you could be a famous model. If you're a really talented actor, you could be an actor. Then these people go out there. I call it the mouse and the wheel type theory. They chase after something that they could never get. They can never get it, not because they're not good enough, not because they're not good looking enough, because it's reserved for these people who are members of secret societies. Now, sometimes somebody on the outside could go out to Hollywood, meet somebody at a club or a bar who works for, let's say, a talent agency or something like that, who is obviously indoctrinated with secret societies and their rituals, and could tell them, look, if you want to get in, you're going to have to maybe meet somebody that come talk to this person that I know. They go, they talk to the person they know, is likely, in her case, an Eastern Star Witch, because that's the female branch of this. And they start saying, hey, you're going to have to go through ritual, you have to go through things, rites they call them sometimes, but they're really rituals. And then you just get indoctrinated with it, and the rest is history, right? And these people don't even know what they're joining, but they get this psychosis they're in is so thick where they want to become famous so bad, they say things like, I'll do anything to become famous. And then they hear celebrities say, hey, it takes a lot of sacrifice to become famous, but they never connect the dots, right? You'll do anything to become famous, and then the celebrity says it takes a lot of sacrifice. Well, they're not talking about staying up late at night working out at the gym. They're talking about literally sacrifice. So here's just a bunch of pictures of her with black and white symbolism around her. Of course, crescent moon symbolism. We always see like the Baphomet. They have an obsession with as above, so below with the crescent moon. And is it a coincidence as well? Because ritual season starts October 13th. For anyone out there that doesn't know, that thinks just Halloween is a satanic day. It's actually a period. It's a season. October 13th to the 31st. You get your numerology with your reversed numbers, 31 and 13. We know 13 is significant to the occult as well, but so is reversals, right? Aleister Crowley and his law of reversals. So the 13th to the 31st. It's a coincidence, too, that this is another story that's out there, by the way, that the Satanic Temple has opened a religious abortion clinic promoting abortion ritual. Is anyone out there starting to see how this works? How important this red liquid is to these monsters? How they thrive off of it? They pretend that they care about reproductive, right? That's their number one issue, the Satanic Temple. They want to make sure people can get abortion. That's it. But nobody connects the dots with, why are they so obsessed with that? Why are they so obsessed with just this specific thing? It's their number one obsession because they care so much about women, right? But then when you look at the origins of Satanism and you look at how important the blood of a child, and then you say, oh, wow, yeah, there might be something to it, right? So we're seeing Satanism all around us every day. It's just a matter of how people are perceiving these stories that are out there. A lot of people see the story about the witch, right? She cast spells on the men that showed up on the property. Well, what do you think? She was just, speaking gibberish out of her rear end. She just started saying, I'm going to make up speech, and she was casting spells because she's a witch, because witches are real. And the sacrifice was clearly part of a ritual offering. You don't just do something like that, okay? Even if you want to say, hey, the people out there that look at things from a motive and a crime standpoint, if somebody out there wanted to look at it and say, well, maybe she got in a heat of the argument moment with her mom, right? Which still is ridiculous and psychotic that we even have to give somebody a reason to dismember someone else. But like I've talked about, a lot of the MK Ultra that's been going on over the last decade or so has literally, people out there think that they're just getting fed all these true crime shows for entertainment. They're programming people on how to kill and how to dismember, because back in the 90s, when we first started hearing some dismemberment stories, it was a huge thing. The whole Dahmer thing was a huge thing because of the dismemberment, how he kept and preserved the body, that kind of stuff. It was people's heads blew up. Now it's like every time you hear any kind of a story, a domestic, the husband and wife, and the husband ended up going after the wife or vice versa, and they cut their head off. And you're just like, what? Wait a minute, it's one thing even, you can't even defend the action of killing somebody else, but they're telling me that after doing so, they cut their arms off, their legs off, their heads off. They know how to do this, right? Because they've been taught to do this without realizing. And all these crime shows, they show the guy, right? Oh, he went to Walmart, he got a circular saw, and then he went home and he did it. I mean, they're literally training people on how to do these things, right? It's incredible. So you're telling me that then after all these things that this girl does with her mother, you can look at the connection to Hollywood, you can take it for what it's worth. You want to sit there and you want to say, well, she probably just wore a coat that had an eyeball on it. Oh, the black and white stuff, I don't believe that either. And okay. Why would you be cooking it? I mean, this is literally like what Witchcraft 101, right? Puts it in a pot and puts it in the oven. Now, one of the stories they're trying to circulate now, of course, is that she had mental health problems because, again, they don't want you to think that witches actually exist and perform ritual sacrifice. But if you actually understand, whatever your take is on the witch trials and stuff, because, of course, there's multiple takes on the witch trials and who was really killed during the witch trials. Many believe Christians were. But let's just take the notion of how witches were getting exposed and Christians were going after witches and witches were getting run out of towns. Do you think they were doing it just because they smelled really bad and had armpit hair? They were doing it because this is what witches were doing. They were caught doing it. Not to mention the fact that this girl supposedly was also involved in doing something with animals. Animal sacrifice was mentioned, and who gets a direct tie into that? Witches and Satanists do as well. Now, they'll stand there and say that that's all make-believe, because when stories like this come out, all they need to do is say, oh, she fell off a motorcycle and hurt her head. Oh, so she suddenly learned how to spellcast because she fell off a motorcycle? Because that's the story now. They're saying, well, she had some problems. She had to come home. She had some mental problems. She fell, hit her head really hard. Also, then she magically learned how to spellcast, right? Because the people who came on the property were talking about spellcasting. So you look at the mental health aspect and you say, well, maybe she just snapped and her mother had a dispute. She was cooking the mother. She was spellcasting out in the open. And then connect all the signs and symbols on her Instagram page and you say, well, this is a witch. But why does the media never cover this stuff like, hey, this is actually happening all around us? Because they don't want you to think that witches actually exist. They want you to think that witches are victims. Oh, these Christians that went after the witches all those years ago. Oh, it was a witch hunt. It was a witch trial, right? They want you to believe that they don't exist. But the ironic thing is they've been training you since you were a child to actually believe in witches existing, because these books like Hansel and Gretel talking about witches, like I said, all the Disney movies that talk about witches. So I mean, and magic, right? They want you to think magic isn't real. It's like, what was she spell casting? She was just singing a song. Is that what we're supposed to believe? Like she wasn't gaining any power from the ritual that she performed? This is a common occurrence. These things are common occurrences. Over the years, I've covered many different stories. There was one in Texas a couple of years ago with two guys that did a ritual, at 666 on the wall. It happens a lot. But what doesn't happen is people aren't explained by the media that these cults are dangerous and they exist. They tell you, well, there should be religious freedom for these people. Well, the reason that there wasn't freedom for these people is because they were killing people, right? So we literally had cults of people who were committing mass human sacrifice rituals on multiple people who were unsuspecting at the time that they were hanging out with people in the occult. So they don't want you to know that. They want you to think that the story's shocking. We haven't heard things like this, right? There's the other story out there that I talked about recently, too. Don't forget about that story, the Delphi murders of the two girls who were on a trail, because the guy who's supposedly on trial for it says he didn't do it, which, okay, he says he didn't do it. We'll have a trial. That's the way it works, apparently, here in America, even though who could even trust that? But he claims that it was part of a Freemasonic ritual that occurred. And they even say that they found the hair of somebody that didn't match him on the girls' bodies, right? So then we could go back to things like the West Memphis 3 and all the propaganda that they put out. Hollywood put millions of dollars in production to make it seem like those kids got framed when they had blood oath contracts with Aleister Crowley, and nobody understood the significance of that, right? I mean, that's what drove me nuts about the West Memphis 3. It was like, well, they wore Metallica shirts, so they got judged, right? And they were like, there's no evidence here, it's the dad. And everybody just follows the trail as if the government themselves, the police themselves, could implant somebody else's DNA on the body and etc. I mean, yes, they can, and they do. They protect Satanists and witches at all costs. And they keep everybody in the dark about the existence of them. And in the case of the West Memphis 3, just the fact that they had a blood oath with Aleister Crowley, who in his books talks about sacrificing young boys, well, then you start going, oh, well, this is pretty sufficient evidence. It's not circumstantial. It's pretty significant evidence, right? They always go out of their way to protect their own. So even in this story, in the Delphi story, they're trying to make it seem, and I don't know what the real story is there, but I know that there's rumors of a ritual sacrifice. And we know that they're real, so we have to look at those things. They want you to just go, ritual sacrifice, what is this, a movie? Same here, right? Oh, well, ritual sacrifice. Maybe she was just off her rocker. Oh, so she knew how to spellcast, and she was using a giant pot, a cauldron, to cook her mom, right? While she's got all these, signs and symbols that we see associated with the occult, on her Instagram account. Satanists are real. Witches are real. They're all around us. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.